Hey everybody, welcome to Grace with Paul Gray. I'm really excited about this new series that we're starting called The Best of Intentions, Grace Intentions. Intention is the scientific term for the biblical term faith. Science has now proven that we can actually bring about things that we intend. And it sounds spooky until you realize, from our perspective, we're talking about faith. Now, I'm not going to teach you about quantum physics, which goes into detail about this, but my friend Steve McVeigh does a super job of that, and I encourage you to listen to him. What I do want to do is encourage us all to have the very best, all caps, best of intentions. Intentions that bring about the best in us and in others. That is faith. Today and for the rest of this week, the intentions that I want to encourage you to intend with me will come from this passage, 1 John 4:16 and 19. John says, "We have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us being everyone. God is love, and the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this, love is perfected in us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. Because as Jesus is, so are we in this world. There's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment. And the one who fears is not perfected in love. We love because he first loved us." So today, here's my intention. I hope you'll consider intending the same thing. I intend to believe totally that God is unconditional love. And everything he thinks and says and does manifests from his perfect unconditional love for everyone. I intend to love as he loves me. Now, here's why it's so important to have this intention. We've been taught that, God loves some people, it's sort of his job, but his love is conditional. There are certain conditions to his love. Most religious people will say, God has unconditional love, and then they'll proceed to give you all the conditions. Unless we are intentional about believing that his love has no conditions, we'll believe the lie that God has conditions for his love. Other people will say, well, of course God's love has conditions. It has to. Then they will list what they think those conditions are. And if we don't have an intention to not believe that and believe his love is intentional, we'll be subject to their lies. Religious people especially will tell you in no uncertain terms that God's unconditional love has conditions. Of course, their conditions may be totally different than the religious group in the next block, but no, never mind, God has conditions. Unless we are intentional about having the intent to believe the truth that God's unconditional love for everyone is unconditional and for everyone, we will hear that evil whisper in our mind that says, God's love's not conditional, or not unconditional. You know that God's love has conditions. You got to keep the rules, especially those rules that you break all the time. And if you don't, God's love's conditional. He ain't going to love you. You can tick God off, and there comes a time when his unconditional love stops and his wrath and vengeance take over. I have a good friend, a pastor, who says, yes, God's love is absolutely conditional. I even believe, he said, that there's a chance on the other side for people to come to know God. God's love is unconditional. But, he said, and he's a really good guy, but, he said, there's a point where that stops. It has to. And then the conditions take over. I've had conversations with well-meaning but misinformed religious friends who said, Paul, come on, Paul, you're just making God out to be better than he is. He's not that good. Nobody is. I've asked religious people if they think God's love is unconditional, and they've actually looked me in the eye and said, I believe it has the potential to be unconditional. Well, if that's not the definition of unconditional, I don't know what is. Oh, man. All right. Silly as that sounds, if you and I aren't intentional about believing that God's love is unconditional for us and everyone, if we don't intentionally say that, and write that and believe that and think about that and make that intention for our lives, we are subject to being deceived and to believing lies. And then that, if we don't believe God's love is unconditional, that colors and flavors every other single thing in our relationship with God. So this very first intention, and I've already planned about 40 more that we're going to have, is the key foundational intention of everything in our relationship with God. Unless and until we totally believe without a single doubt that we have unshakable faith, rock solid belief that God is unconditional love for everyone, until we believe that, everything else is subject to deception. So my intention for today and every day is to totally believe that God's love is unconditional, always and forever, for you, for me, and for everyone. I encourage you to make the same intention. Here's what's helpful for me. Write it down. I wrote it down on the side of my hand. Write it down in your own words. Keep it in front of you. Review it during the day. Say it out loud. Meditate on it. Talk to Jesus about it. Journal about it. Read about what other people write about God's unconditional love. And then tomorrow, review it again. The best of intentions, grace intentions. See you next time, everybody.